What if you stepped into the wilderness, chasing freedom, only to vanish without a trace? 5 years later, a fisherman's discovery in a Montana lake would unravel a truth so dark, it would haunt a family forever. Hey, don't forget to like. Please subscribe for more shocking crime stories and hit the bell icon. The darkest truth are yet to come. It was supposed to be her great escape. At 25, Lena Carver was done with the suffocating routine of her desk job in Seattle, the endless emails, the fluorescent lights that drained her soul. She craved something raw, something real, a chance to prove she could stand alone against the vastness of the world. The Montana wilderness, with its jagged peaks and endless forests, called to her like a siren. She'd spent months planning her solo hike through the Bitterroot National Forest, a 10-day trek across rugged trails where cell service was a myth and the only company was the wind. Lena wasn't reckless. She was a planner, the kind of person who color-coded her gear lists and memorized topographic maps like poetry. Her mother, Lena Carver, had watched her daughter's preparations with a mix of pride and unease. "You're sure about this, Lena?" she'd asked, her voice tight as they sat over coffee the night before Lena's flight to Missoula. Lena had grinned, her hazel eyes bright behind her glasses. "Mom, I've got this. I'll text you every 3 days. Promise." That promise, a simple "I'm okay" text every 72 hours, was their lifeline. Diane clung to it as Lena boarded her flight, her bright red backpack a beacon of her daughter's fierce independence. For the first 3 days, the plan held. On the evening of day 3, Diane's phone pinged with a text. "I'm okay. Trails tough but beautiful." Diane exhaled, the knot in her chest loosening. Lena was out there, thriving, just as she'd always dreamed. But on the 6th day, the silence began to creep in. The second check-in never came. By the morning of the 7th day, Diane was staring at her phone, willing it to light up. She reread Lena's last message, the words now hollow, mocking her growing dread. She called, but the phone went straight to voicemail, a robotic voice that offered no comfort. Lena was meticulous. She had a satellite phone for emergencies, a solar charger, and enough supplies to last 2 weeks. Missing a check-in wasn't like her. Diane tried to reason with herself. Maybe the battery died, maybe the signal was bad, but the excuses felt flimsy against the weight of her fear. By the 8th day, she was pacing her living room, the untouched coffee on the table gone cold. She called the Missoula County Sheriff's Office, her voice shaking as she explained. "Lena Carver, 25, solo hiker, last heard from 4 days ago." The officer on the line was kind but detached, asking for details. Lena's itinerary, her gear, her last known location. Diane pulled out the photo Lena had sent just before she hit the trail. Her daughter standing at the trailhead, her red backpack vivid against the gray rocks, a turquoise water bottle clipped to her belt, her smile wide and fearless. It was the last image Diane had of her. The sheriff's office acted quickly. The Bitterroot National Forest was a beast. 1.6 million acres of dense pines, steep ravines, and trails that could vanish under a single storm. Lena's itinerary, detailed down to the campsite coordinates, helped narrow the search, but it was still like looking for a single star in a midnight sky. Search teams fanned out from the trailhead where Lena's rental car sat, untouched, in the parking lot. The blue hatchback was locked, its interior neat, with a granola bar wrapper on the passenger seat and a folded map on the dashboard. It confirmed she'd started her hike, but it offered no clues beyond that. Helicopters swept over the canopy, their blades slicing through the silence, searching for a flash of red or turquoise. Volunteers scoured the trails, calling Lena's name until their voices grew hoarse. Days bled into a week. They found nothing. No footprints, no dropped gear, no sign of a fall or an attack. It was as if Lena had walked into the forest and dissolved into the air. Diane flew to Missoula, spending her days at the sheriff's command post, her nights staring at the ceiling of a cheap motel room, replaying every conversation she'd ever had with her daughter. "I first read about cases like this in old news articles," Diane would later say, her voice heavy with the weight of hindsight. "You never think it'll be your kid." Imagine, you're standing at the edge of a forest, the trail stretching out like a promise, and you take that first step, believing you're in control. What would it take for you to vanish completely? For Lena, it wasn't just a hike gone wrong. Something or someone had pulled her into a darkness no one saw coming. By the end of the second week, the official search was scaled back. The volunteers went home, the helicopters grounded. The forest, indifferent and vast, offered no answers. Diane refused to leave Missoula, renting a small apartment and calling the sheriff's office daily. The case went cold, the file tucked away in a cabinet, another name added to the list of the missing. Lena's room in Seattle remained untouched, her hiking boots by the door, a half-read novel on her bed, its pages curling with time. Diane would walk in sometimes, just to sit in the silence, breathing in the faint scent of her daughter's lavender shampoo. It was a shrine to a life paused, a wound that refused to heal. 2 years passed, the world moved on, but Diane didn't. She became a ghost in her own life, her days consumed by online forums for missing persons, her nights haunted by dreams of Lena lost in the trees. The sheriff's office assigned a new detective to cold cases, Sarah Klein, a woman with a reputation for chasing loose ends others ignored. Sarah was meticulous, her desk covered in sticky notes and coffee stains, her mind wired for patterns. She pulled Lena's file in the spring of 2017, drawn to the case by its eerie cleanliness. No evidence, no witnesses, just a void. She started from scratch, rereading reports, studying Lena's maps, and diving into her digital footprint. Lena's laptop, stored in evidence, was a treasure trove of her life. Sarah sifted through emails, social media, and browser history, looking for anything the initial investigation might have missed. Most of it was mundane: gear reviews, trail blogs, playlists for the road. But then she found a single email thread buried in a folder labeled hiking plans. That made her pause. It was from a user named Trailseeker22, someone Lena had connected with on a hiking forum called Backcountry Pulse. The messages were friendly at first, exchanging tips on lightweight tents and water filters. But over weeks, Trailseeker22's tone shifted, becoming almost evangelical, preaching about cutting ties with the world and finding true freedom by leaving no trace. "You don't just hike," one message read. "You erase yourself. That's the real adventure." Lena's replies were cautious but intrigued, asking about off-grid routes and survival tips. The final message, sent a week before her trip, was chilling. "Meet me at the Bitterroot trailhead. I know paths no map will ever show you." Sarah's heart sank. This wasn't just a hiker sharing tips. This was someone with an agenda, someone who knew how to manipulate a young woman's hunger for adventure. She dug into Trailseeker22's profile, but the forum was a digital ghost town, its servers long offline. It took weeks of subpoenas to access the site's archived data, and even then, the IP addresses linked to Trailseeker22 were a maze of public Wi-Fi hotspots, libraries, coffee shops, a gas station in Idaho. But one IP stood out, tied to a community college network in Bozeman. With the college's help, Sarah traced it to a student login from 2014, belonging to a man named Ethan Waller. The name was a spark in the dark. Ethan was 32, a drifter with a sparse digital footprint, but his old social media posts echoed Trailseeker22's rhetoric, rants about society's chains, the beauty of disappearing. Sarah ran his name through every database. He had no criminal record, but his last known address was a P.O. box in Missoula, active in 2015. It was a thin lead, but it was the first real one in years. Diane was cautiously informed, her voice trembling with fragile hope. "Is she alive?" she asked. Sarah couldn't answer. The truth was, Ethan Waller was either Lena's guide into oblivion or her predator. The investigation shifted gears. Sarah's team tracked Ethan's movements, piecing together a timeline from 2015. Credit card records showed he'd bought gas in Missoula the day before Lena's hike began, and a grainy ATM photo placed him near the trailhead. But after that, he vanished. No transactions, no sightings. It was as if he'd taken his own advice and erased himself. Sarah sat in her office late at night, staring at Lena's photo, the turquoise water bottle glinting in the sunlight. I still think about this case sometimes, she'd later tell a colleague. It's like she's out there, waiting for us to find her. The team chased every angle, interviewing Ethan's old classmates, his landlord, even a barista who remembered his face. Nothing connected him directly to Lena, but the coincidence of his presence was too stark to ignore. By 2018, the trail had gone cold again. Ethan Waller was a phantom, and Lena's file was once again shelved, heavier with one more dead end. Then in the summer of 2020, a spark broke the silence. On a calm July morning, a fisherman named Caleb Holt was casting his line on Lake Como, a serene spot miles from Lena's planned route. The water was clear that day, the sunlight piercing deep into the depths. As his boat drifted over a quiet cove, something caught his eye. A flash of turquoise, unnatural against the lake's muted tones. He leaned over, squinting into the water. It wasn't trash, it was heavy, oddly shaped, wrapped in something dark and tangled. His stomach churned. This wasn't a lost fishing net. It was something deliberate, something wrong. Caleb cut his engine, his hands trembling as he dialed the sheriff. "There's something in the lake," he said, his voice tight. "It's not supposed to be there." The call set off a chain reaction. Within hours, the cove was a crime scene marked by orange buoys and the low hum of patrol boats. Divers descended, their lights cutting through the murky water. They found it, a waterlogged bundle, wrapped in a tarp, secured with rusted chains and anchored with cinder blocks. When they hauled it to the surface, water streaming from its folds, the team froze. It was a sleeping bag, once vibrant turquoise, now stained and swollen. Inside, something heavy shifted, and the air grew thick with dread. The divers exchanged glances. This wasn't an accident. This was a burial. The turquoise sleeping bag lay on the tarp, its once bright fabric dulled by years underwater, the chains still clinging to it like skeletal fingers. The Lake Como Cove was no longer a peaceful retreat. It was a crime scene, buzzing with the quiet urgency of deputies and forensic techs. The air was heavy with the stench of decay and wet nylon, and Detective Sarah Klein stood at the edge of the tarp, her eyes fixed on the bundle. She'd seen her share of grim discoveries, but this one felt personal. Lena Carver's case had haunted her for 3 years. The photo of the smiling hiker with the turquoise water bottle burned into her mind. The divers had confirmed the sleeping bag's brand and color matched Lena's, but what was inside? Sarah braced herself as the medical examiner, a wiry man named Dr. Ellis, knelt beside the bundle. The team worked in silence, the only sound the snip of bolt cutters slicing through the rusted chains. As the last link fell away, Dr. Ellis peeled back the fabric. A collective gasp broke the stillness. The body inside was skeletal, the flesh long gone, but the clothing, a faded plaid shirt and cargo pants, told a story no one expected. The victim was male. The discovery flipped the case upside down. Sarah's mind raced. If this wasn't Lena, whose body was wrapped in her sleeping bag, and where was she? The remains were carefully bagged and sent to the lab, while Sarah called Lena Carver. Her voice was steady but gentle as she explained the impossible. They'd found Lena's sleeping bag, but it held a man's body. Diane's silence on the other end was deafening, a mix of confusion and renewed grief. "What does this mean?" she whispered. Sarah had no answer, but the question gnawed at her. The lab worked fast. Dental records identified the victim as Nathan Reed, a 27-year-old from Boise, Idaho, reported missing in October 2015, just weeks after Lena vanished. Nathan had been a drifter, a part-time mechanic with a love for the outdoors, last seen leaving a bar in Missoula. His file was thin, no criminal record, no known enemies, just a vague note about a hiking trip he'd planned in the Bitterroot. 2 missing persons cases, separated by weeks and miles, had just collided in the most chilling way. How did Nathan end up in Lena's sleeping bag at the bottom of a lake? Sarah's team dove into Nathan's life, looking for a connection to Lena. They scoured his phone records, social media, and the sparse belongings he'd left behind in a rented room. Nothing linked him directly to Lena, no calls, no messages, no mutual friends. But Sarah wasn't convinced it was random. Imagine, like, You're out in the wilderness thinking you're alone, but someone's watching, waiting. Would you sense it, or would you walk right into their trap? That thought kept Sarah up at night, the idea that Lena and Nathan had crossed paths with the same darkness. She returned to the Backcountry Pulse forum, digging deeper into Lena's exchanges with Trail Seeker 22, the elusive Ethan Waller. The messages hinted at a meeting, but there was no mention of anyone else. Had Nathan been part of the plan, or was he collateral damage? The team tracked down Nathan's last known movements, piecing together a timeline. A gas station receipt placed him in Missoula the day before Lena's hike began, and a bartender recalled him talking about meeting a friend for a camping trip. The friend was never named, but the timing was too close to ignore. Sarah's next lead came from an unlikely source. A volunteer from the 2015 search, a retired park ranger named Tom Grayson, contacted her after hearing about the lake discovery. "I didn't think much of it back then," he said, his voice gravelly over the phone. "But I saw something odd near the trailhead where Lena's car was found." He described a pickup truck parked off a service road, maybe a mile from the trailhead, the night Lena was last heard from. It was an old Ford, rusted with Idaho plates and a dented tailgate. Tom hadn't reported it at the time. Plenty of locals parked in the area, but the memory stuck with him. Sarah's team ran the description through vehicle records from 2015. They got a hit, a 1998 Ford pickup registered to Ethan Waller, the same man tied to Trail Seeker 22. The truck had been sold for scrap in 2016, but the registration placed Ethan in Missoula at the exact time Lena disappeared. It was the strongest link yet, but it still wasn't enough. Ethan was a ghost, his trail cold since 2015. Sarah needed more. A witness, a piece of evidence, something to tie him to Nathan's body and Lena's sleeping bag. The breakthrough came from a dusty box in a Missoula storage unit. Nathan's landlord, clearing out unpaid rentals, had turned over a box of his belongings to the sheriff's office. Inside was a cheap prepaid phone, its battery long dead. Sarah's tech analyst, Officer Ruiz, worked magic to extract its data. The call log showed a single number, dialed repeatedly in the days before Nathan's disappearance. It was a burner phone, untraceable, but its pings matched cell towers near the Bitterroot trailhead in a seedy motel called the Pineview Inn, a rundown spot 20 miles from Lake Como. Sarah's pulse quickened. The Pineview was the kind of place you went to disappear. Cash payments, no questions asked, a flickering neon sign that hadn't been fixed in years. She drove there herself, the gravel lot crunching under her tires. The manager, a chain-smoking woman named Rita, barely looked up from her magazine. "Records from 2015? Good luck," she said, pointing to a back room stacked with moldy boxes. Sarah and Ruiz spent 2 days sifting through yellowed receipts and guest logs. Buried in the mess was a register from September 2015, its pages brittle. One entry dated September 28th caught Sarah's eye. Evan Walsh, cash, room 12, blue hatchback, WA plates. Lena's car was a blue hatchback with Washington plates. Next to it, another entry, Nate R., Commissage, room 13, no vehicle. The names were close enough to raise alarms. Sarah's gut told her Evan Walsh was Ethan Waller, and Nate R. was Nathan Reed. The Pineview Inn became the investigation center. Sarah interviewed Rita, who'd been a cleaner in 2015. Her memory was hazy, dulled by years of monotony, but the photos of Lena and Nathan sparked something. "I remember them," she said, her voice low, like she was afraid of the memory. "They were in and out of room 12. The girl was quiet, always looking at the ground. The guy seemed jumpy, kept pacing. But there was someone else," she said, "a third man, older, with a shaved head and a stare that made her skin crawl. He wasn't on the register, but she saw him lurking around room 12, coming and going at odd hours. He gave me the creeps," Rita admitted, "like he was waiting for something bad to happen." She recalled overhearing a heated argument from room 12 late one night, raised voices, a man shouting, then a sudden crash like furniture hitting the floor. She'd hurried past, too scared to linger. The next morning, the room was empty, the bed stripped, and the blue hatchback was gone. Rita hadn't called the police. "You don't snitch at the Pineview," she said bitterly. "That's how you lose your job." Sarah's team now had a witness and a location, but the third man was a shadow. They cross-referenced Rita's description with Ethan Waller's profile. It didn't match. Ethan was lean, mid-30s, with shaggy hair in his last known photo. This man was older, bulkier, a predator in Rita's words. Sarah turned back to Nathan's burner phone, tracing the number he'd called. It led to a dead end, a prepaid phone bought at a convenience store in Boise. But the store's 2015 surveillance footage, miraculously preserved, showed a man buying the phone. Mid-40s, shaved head, a scar above his left eyebrow. Sarah ran his image through facial recognition. The hit came back. Victor Kane, 46, a career criminal with a rap sheet spanning theft, assault, and drug trafficking. Victor had been a low-level enforcer for a smuggling ring, moving stolen goods across state lines. His last known address was a flop house in Spokane, but he dropped off the radar in 2015. Sarah's theory took shape. Nathan wasn't just a hiker. He was involved in something dirty, and Lena, like Nathan, had been pulled into Victor's orbit. The task force rebuilt the timeline. Nathan, they learned, had been a courier for Victor's smuggling operation, using his camping trips to move stolen electronics across the Northwest. The cash deposits in his bank account, always under the radar, were his cut. But something went wrong. Maybe Nathan got greedy, or maybe he wanted out. He'd confided in Lena, the kindred spirit he'd met online, asking her to join him in Missoula for a meeting with Victor, thinking her presence would keep things civil. It was a fatal mistake. Sarah believed the argument Rita overheard was Nathan trying to break free. Victor, a man with a history of violence, reacted with brutal efficiency. The crash was Nathan's body hitting the floor, killed in a moment of rage. Lena, the unintended witness, became a liability. Victor, skilled at covering his tracks, forced her to help clean the scene, then drove her away in her own car, Nathan's body wrapped in her sleeping bag, dumped in Lake Como with cinder blocks to keep it hidden. But where was Lena? Sarah's team tracked Victor's movements post-2015. He'd used aliases, bouncing between cheap motels and cash jobs. A tip from a Spokane informant placed him in a remote cabin in northern Idaho in 2017. But by the time deputies raided it, the cabin was empty, save for a single item, a turquoise water bottle, identical to Lita's, tucked in a drawer. Sarah's heart sank. It was a cruel taunt, proof Victor had been with Lena after the motel. Diane was informed, her voice breaking as she clutched the phone. "Is she gone?" she asked. Sarah couldn't lie. "We're close, Diane, we're not stopping." But the truth was, Victor was a ghost, and Lena's fate hung in the balance. In early 2021, a break came from a utility bill in a small Montana town. An analyst, digging through Victor's old associates, found a cousin who'd co-signed a lease for a trailer in Polson, Montana in 2016. The tenant was Vince Keller, a name close enough to raise flags. Surveillance confirmed it. Victor Kane living quietly, working odd jobs at a lumberyard. On a gray February morning, Sarah and her team moved in. Victor answered the door, his scarred face expressionless, a cigarette dangling from his lips. He didn't resist, didn't speak, just followed them to the cruiser. In the interrogation room, Victor was a wall of silence, denying everything. Lena, Nathan, the Pineview Inn. Sarah laid out the evidence. The burner phone, the motel register, Rita's testimony, the surveillance footage. "We know you were there, Victor," she said, her voice steady. "We know you killed Nathan. Tell us what happened to Lena." Victor's eyes flicked to the table, a faint smirk curling his lips. He was calculating, weighing his odds like a predator cornered but not caged. After hours of silence, Sarah played her final card. She slid a photo of Lena across the table, her smile at the trailhead full of life. She was 25, Victor. She had a family. A mother who's been waiting 5 years. Tell us where she is. Something shifted in his eyes, not remorse, but a cold pragmatism. "Get me a deal," he said. "Protective custody. I've got enemies." Sarah didn't flinch. "No deal for murder. Tell us where she is and I'll talk to the Bitterroot." Victor leaned back, then asked for a pen. He drew a map, his hand steady, marking a dirt road in the Flathead National Forest, a cluster of pines and an X. "She's there," he said, his voice flat. Sarah felt a chill. It was too easy, too clean. The map led to a remote clearing miles from any trail. The team searched under a merciless sun, their boots sinking into the soft earth. On the second note they found it, a patch of ground, slightly sunken, hidden beneath pine needles. The forensic team dug carefully, uncovering a purple jacket, then bones. Dental records confirmed it. Lena Carver. Victor's confession came later, cold and mechanical. Nathan had tried to quit the smuggling ring. Victor killed him in a fit of rage, and Lena, the witness, was forced to help dispose of the body. He drove her to the forest, raped her to break her spirit, then killed her and buried her shallowly, believing the wilderness would hide his sins. Victor was convicted of 2 counts of murder, kidnapping, and assault, sentenced to life without parole. Diane buried Lena in Seattle, near the ocean she loved. The justice was hollow, a faint echo against the years of grief. I still think about this case sometimes, about how a single choice, to trust a stranger, can unravel everything. Lena wanted freedom, but she walked into a trap set by a man who thrived on control. It's a reminder, the wilderness doesn't just test your strength, it exposes your vulnerabilities. And sometimes the real danger isn't the wild, it's the human heart. Well, have you ever heard of a case like this? Comment your thoughts. That's all for today. Thanks for watching, and catch you in the next one.